Well, welcome, folks.
Good evening.
Good to see you all.
Welcome to SDS Thursday, presented to you by SDS Seminars. We are a UK-based company, and we've been running since 1990. But SDS Thursday started in 2020 when we had the first lockdown. Then we felt a real need to see your faces, and I think you felt the same because we all felt very isolated. And that's how we started gathering for free events on Thursdays. We used to do it every week, but now we are out of lockdown. We can't probably do it every week, so we're trying to do it twice a month, sometimes once a month. My name is Dr. Julia Budnik, and today I am joined by my co-director and founder of SDS Seminars, Paul Grantham, and also by one of our, is it right to say students? Yes, Alan Smithson, but he's your colleague, and Paul and Alan will tell you what we will be talking about today. As always, I will ask you to start typing and to let us know a little bit about yourself. It's not just for our benefit. Tonight, it's also for Alan's benefit. He'll be very interested to know what kind of people came to his event tonight, and also for your colleagues, because everyone wants to have a sense of the room, to know who is coming to SDS Thursdays, where are you coming from? We're always interested. Where in the country are you? Maybe you are not in the UK, maybe you're joining us from overseas, from abroad. That'll be fantastic if you let us know as well. And what kind of setting you're working in. Are you working with children, adolescents, grown-ups, adults? Are you working in the NHS? Are you working in the private sector, maybe in the third sector with charities? Anything which relates to your profession, your job would be very interesting to all of us. And also because, as you know, the topic tonight will be clinical supervision, I would like to ask you two questions. Number one, are you a supervisor? Or number two, are you a supervisee? Do you have regular clinical supervision? And another question, it's now a third question, but never mind, whether you've done clinical supervision training, either with us, with SDS Seminars, with Paul Grantham, or with somebody else. So anything to do with supervision and why you felt you wanted to come tonight, what kind of questions you would like to discuss. And throughout tonight, please, if you think of any question, just pop it in the chat box. I will try to ask it. Or at the end, you will be able to unmute yourself and ask your questions yourself if you want to question or comment on what you were hearing. I want to share my screen very briefly with you. Okay, so you are probably very familiar with this website. It's SDS website. Yes, another question which I always ask, and I haven't asked yet tonight, is whether you've been to any SDS training events and whether you've been to SDS Thursdays. And if this is your first Thursday, then please let us know, how did you discover us? How did you hear? Where did you hear about us? So this is SDS website, skillsdevelopment.co.uk. And for those who are watching it as a recording on YouTube, I will put a QR code on the screen, so you will be able to just scan it and get straight onto our website. And if you're watching it as a recording, please don't forget to put a like and maybe even comment so that more people can discover this video. Okay, so to find clinical supervision course, all you need to do is click on all courses and you will see the first course, which is showing on the screen, is Essential Supervision Skills course, which is a part of BPS approved certificate in clinical supervision. And I'll tell you a little secret. The courses on this page are sorted in order of popularity. So clinical supervision course with Paul Grantham is our most popular course. We've probably trained, I don't know how many people, Paul, do you have any idea how many people we trained in supervision?
I'm gonna pitch in here probably somewhere between about 2,000 and 3,000.
Yes, definitely thousands of people who came to supervision course. And the course, which is very, very rare, it's one of the very few, if not uniquely, courses, which a short course and course from a private company like us, which is both BPS approved and also makes the psychologists eligible to be registered in British Psychological Society register of clinical supervisors. So that's quite unique. But the course, two-day course on clinical supervision is part of a bigger diploma, a bigger certificate, a certificate in clinical supervision, which actually consists of 4 parts. It's the two-day course on clinical supervision. It's an exam, which is a second part of the certificate. Then it is third part, which gives you level 3 accreditation in clinical supervision, which is advanced supervision course. And finally, it is an assignment which you complete, and it gives you level 4 accreditation, which is proficiency. And I am telling you this because this is actually how this particular event came about, through this very certificate in clinical supervision. But Paul will tell you more about it. But what I wanted to mention, if you've done certificate in clinical supervision with us, you have these other levels to go further and further in terms of your training as a clinical supervisor. And please feel free to browse our website to look at these levels, or maybe contact our office if you want to know more about this certificate. Okay, so that's enough of me. I am very happy to pass the microphone to Paul Grantham, who will introduce Alan and tell you a little bit about him. Please, Paul.
Thanks very much, Julia, and welcome everybody this evening. I still haven't quite worked out whether spring has occurred yet, where I actually am. It comes and goes, but thanks very much for coming and joining us this evening, really. This evening, what I'm going to do is have an opportunity of chatting to Alan Smithson, who has completed some research on clinical supervision. And the reason why I wanted to do this was that Alan had done this as part of the level 4 certificate that we actually offer. And I have to say that he is near enough unique in our experience in having decided to opt for an empirical experimental study rather than a qualitative report. So that's one of the things that caught my eye when it was originally submitted. The second thing to say about this, if you're not aware of it, and particularly for those of you that have not done any training on supervision with us before, one of my big bugbears is the absence of empirical research around in the clinical supervision area. Lots of opinion, lots of advice about how to do things, but actually it's all pretty thin on the ground, really, in terms of solid research, particularly over things like outcomes, however you wish to define that. So that also struck me. I will be blunt with you and say I was very taken aback by the quality of the submission as well. And that's why basically, I was attracted to wanting to talk to Alan more about the work that had actually been done, and I thought it, to be honest with you, deserved wider publicity. Because there's some interesting findings in it, and I think the quality of the work is outstanding as well. And I think, if I'm honest with you, the other reason why I wanted to bring it along or to talk to Alan about it this evening is that I hope that it gives some of you some inspiration for dipping your toes into doing some research work. I think people often feel very disabled in terms of engaging in empirical research, and I'm hoping that some of the conversation that we're going to have together tonight will inspire you to have a go yourself, really. So I'm mentioning that because although I'm very interested indeed in talking to Alan to find out some of his findings and to share them with you, I'm also going to be interested as well to encourage him to share the actual logistical and practical processes of going through and doing this study. And I hope to some degree it demystifies it for a number of you, and as a result of that encourages you to actually get engaged. So I've been talking enough already, so let's sort of move across to Alan now. Maybe Alan, you could say a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you're based, just so people can have a bit of a sense of you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. And hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Although I don't think you're all on my screen, but hey ho. Yeah. So I'm a counsellor. I've been working as a counsellor for the last 8 or 9 years, and I work at a local charity offering counselling to people of all ages. And we particularly work with people who would find it difficult to afford counselling, being quite expensive to find privately. So that's the main part of my role. I also teach counselling, and yeah, I've just really loved having this as my profession, despite the challenges that have been there as well.
Sorry, whereabouts are you based?
Sure. Yeah, I'm based in Sussex, East Sussex, and yeah, this is where I live with my family, and yeah,
Great.
That's that.
Yeah, no, it gives us just a sense, you know, it's just important, I think, to just be able to place you. So let's kick off with the basics first of all. Maybe you could just say a little bit about what question you looked at in your research, and maybe what it was that led you to choose that particular question.
Yeah, sure. So the question was examining the impact of supervision frequency and duration on counselling and psychotherapy outcomes. So really what I was looking for is something relatively easy for me to measure, having not done a research project since uni in 2012. I wanted something quantitative that would be measurable fairly straightforwardly. So this was the question I chose, and mostly, Paul, it's because there was a clear gap in the literature around this particular question as well, around what difference does it actually make when supervision is over a longer period of time, over a shorter period, if it's done frequently, infrequently. I've certainly noticed that there's a lot of diversity in that regard when I speak to counsellors and supervisors in terms of how long the sessions are.
And if I could just pull out one brief point, which I think is worth passing on to other people, I think the clear focus that you had for your research is an advantage. I think sometimes when people think that they want to do research, they have very broad-based, maybe rather vague things that they want to explore. And I think you're quite right. I think you did an excellent thing, which was to have a very clear focus to what you wanted to look at. One of the things that struck me, I will be honest with you, when I first looked at what you produced was the sample size. So this is actually a piece of research that involves 118 people. which, can I just say, for those of you that are not familiar with the area, is an unusually large sample size in the clinical supervision field. So maybe you can say a little bit about the practicalities of how you get 118 people, basically.
Yeah, sure. Well, it helps first and foremost to work at a charity that employs between 50 and 60 counsellors. So that was a good start. And then utilising LinkedIn, the network I've built, I've got links through my teaching work as well. So I was able to reach quite a lot of counsellors. I mean, it took about 4 or 5 months to get that many people together, that many respondents. And one of the challenges was, because I was offering an Amazon gift voucher, the moment I put it on LinkedIn, I had endless spam, which were quite easy to weed out, actually, because of all the ridiculous emails and contradictions that were in the responses. So once I whittled those down, I was left with 118 genuine respondents, which I was quite pleased with.
Right. So again, just if I can just bring that together. So you, in a sense, were able to maximize, as a result, your existing network, and that a lot of these people were actually recruited online as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was about 50 or so from my organization I work with and related ones, and then the rest from online connections on LinkedIn. I'm very grateful for some reshares and reposts that were made by other fellow counsellors who also have their own networks. To be honest, when I put it on LinkedIn and put the voucher there, I was expecting more even, but in the end I was pleased to have over 100.
Oh, I think it's an unusually high sample size, as I mentioned to you before. So again, let me just get this clear in my head. So when you were looking for research subjects for this, you had to make an approach more than once.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
Right.
So I posted
Okay.
it a couple of times on my networks and
Okay.
boosted it a few times on LinkedIn, and fortunately
Right.
had some reposts. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just so we can understand the details about the Amazon gift voucher, are you saying that you gave an Amazon gift voucher to 118 people?
Oh, no. I said there's a chance. I said you're going to be entered into it if you choose. So
Right.
people could leave their email. Otherwise, that would have been quite a costly endeavor. It was a £50 voucher I was offering. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. It's Jeff. I'm sorry to ask you these sort of details.
No, that's okay.
I think they're really there'll be issues on people's minds, I think, if they're thinking about doing this and the practicalities of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So regarding your results, what would you say were the main findings about frequency, duration, satisfaction, and their relationship together?
Yeah, sure. So I was really pleased. Actually, there was a significant difference found, particularly in the satisfaction levels between those who meet fortnightly with their supervisor and those who meet monthly. So what that means is that the results showed that it's very unlikely to be down to chance that this difference was there. So the chances are, probability says that that's a significant difference to be observed. That satisfaction is significantly higher if supervision is held on a fortnightly basis as opposed to monthly.
Right. Okay. And that is interesting because, the last time that certainly we looked at this question, which was a number of years ago, we hadn't seen that difference. And the fact that you've discovered that that's something around now in this particular group, I really found quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any, I mean, I'm guessing that most people here, when they're receiving supervision, I'm guessing that most are operating on a monthly basis. And certainly if you look at basic requirements that are around for most professional bodies, it tends to be, well, they talk about, a minimum of a month typically, which is actually what people do. I'm just interested to I suppose I'm interested to know why you think that fortnight versus a month made a difference to people.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably related to the other finding,
Right,
which is that there was no significant difference in satisfaction found between sessions being 60 minutes or
right,
sessions being 120 minutes. So
right.
I think what I observed there was that it doesn't seem to make much of a difference in satisfaction if the session is beyond 60 minutes.
Right.
So my sense is that little and often might be more effective than the opposite.
Yeah, gosh, there's a whole interesting conversation to be had about that, along with some of the changes that are actually occurring around at the moment. So, in a way, I don't want to put words into your mouth here, but are we sort of saying that one of the big advantages of frequency is it actually provides increased accessibility in terms of supervision? And by definition, if we are seeing people on a monthly basis, then obviously by definition there's less accessibility. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that frequency appears to be more important than duration?
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
particular thoughts on why you think that might be the case?
I mean, my interpretation, and this is backed up by some of the qualitative data through the comments that were left as well, is that people appreciate the timely support. They appreciate it being within a reasonable time frame of sessions that are probably occurring weekly. I'm wondering if I've just seen a client and I have 3 more sessions with them before I even have a supervision session, how much might be getting lost there in terms of impact and possible support from a supervisor.
Right.
So I wonder if it's quality over quantity in terms of meeting regularly rather than for longer times.
Right. And I guess as well, if that is a motivation, it would also highlight the particularly important role from a supervisee's perspective of how supervision is so important for support. I mean, we know that supervision has other functions to fulfill as well, but it would suggest that that supportive element is clearly particularly important to supervisees. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
You also in your study did something about or spent some time looking at supervisor qualities, which I always find a really interesting area. What did you discover there?
Yeah, so I did note this down. I'm just going to find it. There were some supervisor qualities that I picked out based off of some existing questionnaires that were out there. I kind of tailored it based off of that. But what I saw is that the average satisfaction scores across the board were highest for the qualities of being approachable, having my independence as a practitioner encouraged, being given good feedback, and those that were lowest were the qualities of having my professional needs addressed, or helping with stress management, and also something around session duration was there around the qualities as well being less important for people.
Right. Okay. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just thinking about this from some of the things that have cropped up before. This obviously clearly again emphasizes the value of support. But I think it's quite interesting that the 2 qualities that are valued the least would within supervision basically relate in many ways to developmental supervision. And also, I think as well, which I think, I mean, what you mentioned about stress management is interesting because that I think, I mean, I interpret it rightly or wrongly as basically saying we recognize that supervision is not therapy for us. It is about something else. It's to do with clients. And that, for that particular reason, I'm not coming to my supervisor in order to know primarily how to manage stress.
Yeah.
actually, in an interesting way, it brings us back yet again to my concerns about clients and the role that clients actually play in this.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by those results or not? Did they fit in with your own experience? I'm just interested to know when you first saw those, what your thoughts were on those.
Yeah, with the qualities, I mean, I think it didn't surprise me personally. I think it fit with what I expected. But what I noticed as well, Paul, is that it seems to be variable depending on someone's career stage, what they value.
Right,
Although it wasn't enough to measure the significance of that, but I just observed that it seemed that those who have been in practice for longer had different needs from their
right,
supervisor. There was more of a sort of educative need for those who were early on in their practice.
right.
Yeah, that also was something that made sense, but I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, well, that sort of chimes with some of the thinking that I guess I've been involved in as well in recent years. I guess there's a part of me, I don't want to go into it now, but there's a part of me that's increasingly wondering whether what supervision means is actually and what it's there for, in fact,
Mm,
is actually enormously variable according to where you are in your career life cycle.
mm, mm.
And maybe those findings that you've got there are a pointer in that particular direction,
Yeah.
which is very interesting.
Mm,
Because as I'm sure you're aware, I don't know whether other people are, particularly if they've not worked with us on this, but you'll no doubt be aware that there is no agreed definition really of what clinical supervision actually is.
mm, mm,
And you know, it does get more complicated, I think, if an individual in a profession is in training at one end of the spectrum, but at the other end of the spectrum, they've been practicing for, you know, the last 15, 20 years. And I think that's a really interesting issue. And I would love to see that finding being used as a springboard for discussion. It's yeah, I just think it's a very important issue to have a look at, really. You also spent some time as well, if I understand you on this, you also spent some time asking about the difference between online versus face-to-face, like I'm
Yeah.
assuming in the same room type supervision.
Yes.
And what did you find there?
So just unanimously a strong preference for face-to-face, while also everyone seemingly acknowledging the benefits, the convenience of offering it online. So yeah, very much across the board, a recognition of the value of face-to-face interaction, I think, and that would echo what I'm seeing with clients as well. That yeah, it's convenient meeting online, but there's something that seems to be missed or lost.
Yeah, I mean that is interesting. We were actually just talking about this, weren't we, before we went live, both in terms of supervision and client work,
Mm, mm,
that in many ways all of us were forced into online work during the pandemic, without really any, you know, active decisions or reflection on it. Circumstances forced us into it.
mm,
And to varying degrees, it's continued since then, largely, to be honest with you, because of a convenience and cost element.
yeah.
But as we were talking beforehand, it is not the same. It's not the same. And despite, you know, what I find quite interesting, sorry, I won't spend too much time on this, but what I find quite interesting is that there's not a lot that seems to me to be written about this. There's most of stuff I've come across tends to try and reassure that there's no major difference between the two. But it's very interesting that you found that it was quite categorically preferred for supervisees. Well, just out of interest, again, from your perspective, why do you think that, I mean, because obviously if supervisees think this, it could be that clients think this as well. Why do you think, if we just look at the supervisees, why do you think supervisees have got that clear preference for in the room if they're given the choice?
I think there are probably a whole host of reasons, Paul, but you know, I'll speak for myself personally. I think I feel as if I'm getting more value for money in person, like I'm getting the full person. I'm getting
Right.
their full attention. And I think there's an element of the ceremony of going to supervision almost, you know, leaving the house, leaving my desk and my screen and going to sit with someone who's got more experience than I. And I think there's something quite special about that gets lost when it's just online.
Right. I mean,
And
can I
yeah,
just push you a bit further on that? Because
yeah,
I
go
find
on.
that really quite interesting. Are you saying then that there might be a greater tendency to view something as having value if it's actually in the room rather than
Mm, mm.
through a screen? Is that, do you think that's involved?
I mean, that wasn't explicitly mentioned in the qualitative data, but that would be my interpretation. Um,
Right. Okay.
you know, that's true for me at least. And
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard I've heard as much from clients as well who inquire. And you know, when I can only offer online, there's actually no, I want face to face or nothing. There's a real
Right.
clear preference for face to face, almost like it's not worth it if it's online.
Right, interesting. And to some degree, this must bring us back yet again to the centrality of the role of the relationship,
Mm,
whether that's between supervisor and supervisee or client
yeah,
and
certainly.
therapist. And there is something about the fact that the relationship is not quite the same when it's through a screen in some
No.
particular way. I mean, can I just say what I loved about your work was, although I really liked your findings and I
Mm,
love the way you designed it, I just thought it was wonderful because it just sparked off so many questions for me, which I really hope that you and other people will want to pursue more, because I think they're really, really important questions. I think you've done some really important work here.
mm.
What did you discover, if anything at all, about the issue of preparation for supervision meetings?
Yeah, there were comments made
Can I
around.
interrupt for a
Sure.
second? I'm sorry, because I am reading in the chat lots of very interesting comments. And just, I like the comment Sean posted here about whether people who said they only want face-to-face in the room, have they actually ever attended supervision online? Could they compare, or they probably just had, if they're from the same charity and have a chance to have supervision in the room, did they have a chance to compare? Did you have that question, Alan, whether they've ever experienced it online or in the room?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, because the results were anonymized, I'm not sure if it was folk from the charity or from elsewhere. I don't know, to be honest. My guess would be that some probably just have a gut feeling about it and have decided. But have, you know, as someone who has experienced online and face-to-face supervision personally, I could only speak for myself and say, for me, there's a clear preference, having tried both, and I suspect that there are others who feel similarly.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, it's just what I just wanted to emphasize with that. Even reading your comments and further questions which you're asking, Alan, it just shows how many questions can be researched, because clearly, obviously, Alan's research maybe didn't cover them all, but we'll try to go through some of them later. But it's just one of the areas which doesn't have very much research. And if it inspires you to try to do some of it, that clearly even in the chat, we have lots of questions, which would be a basis for your research. Sorry for interruption. I'll mute myself.
No. I would just really wish to re-emphasize this. I really hope that our discussion today inspires and enthuses you to say, gosh, that's a really, that question is a really interesting question. I'd like to go and look at that myself.
Yeah.
and to see what's coming out of it. So if I can just bring you back to this question of preparation again.
Yeah, sure.
Can you say a little bit? I mean, you asked about that, or you found that it came out spontaneously in the qualitative comments? How did you? What were your findings on that?
Yeah, that was something that wasn't actually directly asked, but it was something that did emerge as several times in the qualitative data. People commenting on the importance of it. There was a question around any other comments you have about the quality of supervision, and that was one of the common themes, was the impact on the quality of supervision of preparing beforehand. And
Right.
again, that would align with my own experience and that of my supervisees, that having done a little thinking about it, not hours, just even 10 minutes before the session, just focusing in on what I want to utilize the time for today, seemed to make a big difference for people.
And I mean, if I can just ask you a question about this, because my experience tends to be that in the absence of directly addressing that question, people very commonly don't actually prepare for supervision questions. I'm just wondering if you've got any advice or suggestions, either if you're talking to supervisees or to supervisors that are working with supervisees, what sorts of things would you recommend that are done to encourage that?
I suppose it depends if I was in the role of supervisor, but I might just ask an open question about it, around how might you get the best out of supervision, encourage that creative thought. I might suggest, some supervisees find it really useful to spend some time beforehand preparing. Perhaps you'd like to give some thought to that for yourself. But I suppose it's an individual thing at the end of the day. But this was a comment that was made several times across the board.
So in terms of what you do yourself as a supervisor, I mean that encouragement to supervisees to reflect, to think about in advance, is that something that you would typically do at the beginning of the supervision relationship? Is it something that you do at the end of each session, before the next one? I'm just interested in the practicalities of how that's done.
I suppose it's a bit more bespoke than that, Paul, because I guess if I'm picking up that my supervisee is seeming a bit unsure of how to use the time, or seems to be fumbling around for something to bring, that might be my cue to inquire about preparation beforehand.
Right. Okay. So basically, if you perceive a need, that's actually there. Okay. Okay. That I think is really interesting. What did you discover? I mean, I don't know. I can't remember if you looked at this question, but I'm always interested in this question. What did you discover about attitudes towards both cost? Because I think we were making the assumption that for most people, they were paying for their supervision. What did you discover about cost? And also, what did you discover about attitudes towards peer supervision?
Yeah. So the themes in the comments, perhaps it's due to the rising cost of living. Really kind of echoed this concern about affordability, particularly those who are early on in their career journeys. In fact, it was a comment made by a couple of more experienced practitioners, that they kind of feel sorry for newly qualified therapists in the current climate, where they're having to shell out this money on top of everything else while building their practice. So I think there is a concern about the cost of it. My sense is there might even be a sense of reluctance or resentment building around having to pay for something, particularly if people aren't finding that they're getting the best outcomes from it, which again might relate to our other question.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? That this issue, it's not the first time I've come across it, and it is interesting that I I get the impression that a number of professional bodies are increasingly aware of it. How they are adapting to it is quite variable. I've seen one particular change, which I don't think I've mentioned to you. It's probably the first time you've heard it, and you will throw up your hands in horror when you hear what I'm about to say, because I threw up my hands in horror when I actually read it. But there is one particular major professional body in this particular field who, when you look through their requirements for supervision, are actually saying that there is actually now only a minimum requirement of live face-to-face supervision of twice a year.
Wow.
And that, you know, supervision can now be covered by texting, by emails, etc. Yeah, it's an issue. If obviously you're employed, and it's provided within your organization, then it's hopefully not so much of an issue. Although, again, can I just say, I can think of instances where it still slips. But I can fully understand that dilemma. And yeah, it's a real issue about how our professions are going to adapt to that.
Yeah.
It's a tricky issue, yeah.
That doesn't seem like enough at all, does it? Twice a year?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, when I read it, I had to reread what I was reading about 4 times to make sure I hadn't misinterpreted what it was I was actually reading. And I'm still a bit uncertain about how to respond to it, really. But anyway, we'll leave that to one side. But I think I know where it came from, and I think it came from the issue of cost, not just financial cost, but I think time cost as well.
Yeah.
As well for some folks, it's a real issue. It's a real issue around. You said, sorry.
The question about peer supervision, Paul. So, just to answer that one, there was a theme as well around people really valuing the affordability of peer supervision as a way of complementing paid supervision, and a recognition of the importance of getting a diversity of perspectives, you know, among different professionals. I mean, that can be simulated in group supervision as well, but I think there was a real value placed on peer supervision as a cost-effective alternative to at least twice a month supervision, for example.
Right. But you got the impression from the data that was valued as an add-on rather than a replacement.
Yes, yeah, to complement existing supervision.
Right. Okay. When you look at differences in attitude towards supervision across the career spectrum, was your primary finding that basically more experienced practitioners had a specific need from supervision which was different from less experienced practitioners, or did you notice or see anything else that was a difference across the career spectrum?
Yeah, so like I touched on earlier, there seem to be some differences in what people are looking for depending on their stage in their career, and that particularly early career professionals really valuing that consistency and the need for education around how to apply these concepts that they might not have had that much training in really applying yet, having just learned about it. Whereas later on it might be more specific, more kind of niche client issues, or, you know, just a sounding board, really. Perhaps more of the restorative stuff, I imagine.
Right. Okay. And again, I think that's really quite interesting. And I guess for me, one of the interesting questions that again raises is whether it's actually really viable for instance, professional bodies to ever prescribe a protocol for how supervision ought to be conducted, because it may well be quite variable according to folks' different needs.
Yeah.
I know, because we talked about this, that your research is actually being published. And I just wonder if you could say a little bit about where and how you actually went about that, really, because I know that can feel quite overwhelming or disabling for some people. And of course, you know, we know that imposter syndrome is a very common problem amongst our professions. So I'm just interested if you can say a little bit about where it's going to be published and basically just the mechanics of how you go about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, my imposter's been on overdrive today. Yeah, what I did, Paul, with your kind encouragement was I submitted it to the clinical supervisor journal,
Right.
which has been calling for papers.
Right.
I think due to this perceived scarcity in
Yeah.
research in this particular area, they've been screaming out for people to submit things to their journal.
Good to hear. Yeah.
So that's why I sent it through to them. It's currently under review. It's past the initial stages. Apparently, it's a lengthy process. So I'm hopeful that it will be published. But yeah, I must admit I didn't consider publishing it when I initially did it, and yeah, I was really grateful for your encouragement. Because you know it's quite a straightforward and simple design, really, for a research project. Really, it's just a questionnaire with a lot of interpretation. So
As
regarding
the best ones are.
yeah, so
can you just say? Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Can you just take us through just briefly the time span for this? So let's assume that you've completed the project. You've written it up for yourself. You then submit it. What sort of time span are we talking about before, for example, you get a reply? Where does that go from there?
It was actually really quick, Paul, that they responded to me very quickly. It went through the initial stages. It's now just in the review stage, where presumably it's being viewed by more of their professional team before it's considered for publication. But the initial stages were really quick, and communication was great actually from the publisher.
That's great, and I mean, we will obviously really want to see it when it's in print, and we will be distributing it as well to folks because I know that everyone will find that valuable.
Sure.
Let me pass you back to Julia, because I don't know if there's other questions, Julia, that have come up in the chat box that maybe are worth having a look at in terms of any remaining time that we've actually got.
There are quite a lot of questions, but I wanted to single out one particular question and broaden it out a little bit. Just about the initial research which Alan submitted to you, Paul, as part of the clinical supervision certificate. First question, Alan, why did you decide to do the research rather than much easier just report? And secondly, did you check out with Paul the topic and methodology, or you just went for your research and submitted to Paul the final product? And that's the question also to you, Paul. If somebody else wants to go down this route, do they need to check out their project with you before they start, or you're quite happy for them to go ahead and submit the final project to you?
Okay, well, I'll let Alan answer it first of all before I stick my head in.
Yeah, sure. No, I didn't check with Paul. I just sent it straight through. And the first question was, why did I choose to do it? I suppose I was enticed by the messaging on the website that said, "This is a greenfield site. Please do some research, someone." So I really kind of
desperate, did it?
Yeah, there was an air of desperation, but no, as well as that, to be honest, I've had an itch to scratch since I graduated in psychology, and I must admit I didn't focus very much on my studies back then, and since then I've had a sort of need for revenge to do something and publish something or write up something worthy. So yeah, I feel I've definitely scratched that itch, and I'd like to do some more.
Great, fantastic.
Excellent.
So from my perspective, as you can hear, it was not checked out beforehand. What I would say is that feel free, if you want to do this, to check out in advance with me, but it's certainly not essential. And can I just say, it wouldn't in itself have any implications for whether that submission passes or doesn't pass. What I would probably say, if you haven't got any experience of research, is to really highlight something that I was mentioning earlier, which is make sure you choose something which is small and focused. That's the key, really. I think very often, if people haven't done research before, it's very tempting indeed to take what appears to be a huge issue, which they would love to know the answer to, but actually trying to do something empirically with it is much more complicated. So keep a clear focus. If you want to ask me a question about, I'm thinking of doing this, what are your thoughts on it? Happy to answer that, but it's not essential. No. Yeah.
Thank you. And as Paul and Alan already mentioned, after Paul received this research and read it through, he encouraged Alan to submit it for publication. And we really hope that you will share it with us, Alan, and we will very happily send the link to all of you to have a look at it, because I know that Bill was asking whether the research is published, whether he could read it. And generally encourage all of you to think of something like that, or to do our clinical supervision diploma. I keep calling it diploma, maybe it meant to be certificate, to the very end, to the level 4, and submit a paper, at least to us, to start with. What I also wanted to say to all of you, if it was our first actually evening when we invited one of our students who were doing training with us to share something of their own with the whole group, with you. But if any of you have something, your pet topic, something you've researched really well, something you've experimented with, something you want to share with others, please feel free to write to us, and we'll be always very interested in inviting, or maybe you are working in a niche field which not many people know about and you would like to share with them. Please feel free to write to us, and we will have a meeting, and maybe we'll invite you to one of these Thursdays to share your work with your colleagues. So that would be absolutely wonderful. There are some specific questions about Alan's research. What I will do, Alan, I will copy them and maybe send you an email. Maybe you could give us just very brief answers. So when we send out the recording, people can see your answers to their questions.
Sure.
Well, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for coming. And we will see you again soon. I think it's another one in March coming up. And have a good evening. And you can unmute yourself and say your goodbyes and thank yous to Alan and Paul. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Alan.
Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Look after yourselves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Look after yourselves. Wonderful to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.